Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Halfway with Jeremy Roden. Tonight, we have Paul Claerhout. He's an illustrator and artist, currently working on Bob's Burgers. Paul, thank you so much for doing this, and tell us a story about how you got into animation and film.
Oh, yeah. Well, my first job in the biz was at K&H Productions. And I believe Keith Alcorn and John Davis started there too. But I started there in 1980. I got hired on as assistant camera operator for the Oxbury animation camera. And then they found out I could draw and they put me in the art department. I worked there for about a year. And then I went to San Antonio, worked at a big studio down there called Hayes Productions. It had an animation department and they did live action TV commercials and corporate videos and all that kind of stuff too. And then I worked in Austin for a while for a guy I worked with at K&H named Dave Hamby. Worked there for about a year and then came back to Dallas, was freelancing at Bill Stokes and K&H and kind of reconnected with John and Keith. And then when K&H shut down, John and Keith started their own business and I was the third wheel there.
When I was interviewing Keith a few months ago, talking about animation roots here in Texas, and Keith talked about him being self-taught. He did go to UTA and just loved animation, but for the most part, he taught himself. John, I know that had gone to SMU. When you were in high school, were you drawing in high school prior to that
Yeah.
as a kid?
Yeah, I was drew all the time and I was like a teenage Ray Harryhausen. I was doing stop motion films in my bedroom. In fact, I have the camera right here.
All right. Look at that.
Old 1960s regular 8mm camera. Yeah, you just kind of figure it out on your own. There's only one book available on how to do stop motion, and it was very basic. So,
You mentioned Ray Harryhausen. Phil Tippett, Starship Troopers had come out at
uh-huh.
one point, and Phil Tippett worked on Star Wars. He's the guy that made the AT-ATs walk on the planet Hoth, and an incredible background, and of course Jurassic Park. When 3D animation started coming out, did you think that you weren't going to have a job because you were doing things by hand using that camera and doing it old school?
Yeah, well, I worried about that at first, but then you just kind of that's where I kind of sidelined into doing storyboards. I remember when we started Jimmy Neutron back in the 90s with the first development of it. John described CGI as like doing stop motion, but just the model is a virtual one in the computer instead. So that's why my first designs for Jimmy were kind of based on George Pal's Puppetoons.
But
I
yeah.
was kind of looking for that kind of a look to it.
What inspiration did you have? I know you mentioned Ray Harryhausen. Those skeletons scared me to death when I saw Clash of the Titans for the
Yeah.
first time. But what were some of your inspirations that got you into trying animation, working with that camera and drawing?
First thing was probably I saw King Kong as a little kid. My dad took me to see it. It had just been re-released at the theaters, after 35 years later. And so that just blew my mind. And I pestered my dad constantly. How did they do that? How'd they do that? Found some books on it and stuff and just started figuring it out from there. And I was really into imitating the drawing style of Willis O'Brien and stuff. And then kind of discovered Ray Harryhausen after that and started watching his films because he was still making films back in the 70s. So, yeah, so I just had that set up in my bedroom. Home camera on a tripod and a fold up table with a little miniature set on it and stuff. And
Yeah, my best friend, when we were working on the movie, my best friend John was working at Janimation, another animation house in the
mhm.
area, and they were doing a lot of commercial work. And there's a gentleman there that worked on RoboCop here in Dallas because it was,
Yeah,
filmed and did a lot of the
that's
effects.
the Greg Punjans.
Yeah, yep. Greg, fantastic artist, amazing. Did a lot of special
Yeah,
effects. So I
really
think his
good.
dad, yeah, incredible. In fact, he gave a talk at Richland College when I was there teaching there full time, and I was the program director. And he came and talked about some stop motion stuff. And I think John even had the glove. I think Greg had given John the glove of RoboCop. and
Wow.
he had it, which is really cool. I think it was the foam one. I'm sure there were
Mhm.
several, and they talked about how I'm probably using the wrong word, but caustic the paint was. That blue, just iridescent paint that
Mhm.
RoboCop was in. But I remember that specifically. But John and I, you mentioned that you would, set up these scenes in your room. We would share these stories, how we would dig holes in our backyards, and reenact Return of the Jedi, right? The Sarlacc pit and
Yeah,
various things. And when it happened to snow, we would reenact, Empire Strikes Back. And it was just such a fun time. And I'm curious, what are your opinions, about kids these days where video games, they're incredible, VR, incredible technology, AI. I mean, things that we worked so hard as animators and technical directors, we had to build from scratch essentially on that assembly line, if you will. And now with AI, you put in a prompt and you
yeah.
get these amazing scenes. But getting back to the imagination, being a kid in the backyard, digging a hole with action figures, those plastic Kenner action figures, there is so much value into having that childhood because we made our own fun. We made our own entertainment.
I
So,
think something to be said about having to figure stuff out yourself.
mhm,
Now it's information's everywhere. You can go on YouTube and have someone teach you how to do the simplest basic stuff, even really
mhm.
complicated stuff. And, even now you can make a nice film with this, It's
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
amazing. Um, yeah, I had someone back in the day told me that, back then making a film was like writing a novel with a 500-pound pencil. Is,
That's a great
the
analogy.
old
That's a
equipment was
great
so
analogy.
difficult to work with.
Yeah. Yeah.
Everything that could go wrong usually did go wrong.
We're using off the shelf Lightwave, New Tech Lightwave,
Yeah. Yeah.
and Project Messiah. The animators were using that for a
Mhm.
lot of the inverse kinematics. But it's really nice to see all those tools come into play.
Yeah.
And the fact that we made that movie with that technology just off
Mhm.
the shelf compared to what Pixar and DreamWorks was doing, who we ended up getting nominated against.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
It
we did a
still
lot
looks
with that
good too,
software.
you know?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
stuff is better now, but it still looks pretty good.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I try to when I see it on TV or I was in the store, I saw some Jimmy Neutron socks about a year ago, and I texted a picture of them, ended up buying them. I texted them to Keith, so it's kind of cool that some of that stuff lives and people remember it. I've got my corporate day job, and I do work in media and in a marketing content creation capacity. And my background using that technology, I'm still using today. I use it in my for my woodworking business.
Mhm.
And I'll be talking to somebody and animation will come up, and I'll be talking with somebody that was a kid watching Jimmy Neutron, when we were all in our 20s and 30s and 40s
Yeah.
working on that movie. I was in my 20s and they just can't believe it. I was like, yeah, it was a great time. It was like, how I told Keith, it was like working in a fun house. It was just always entertaining every
Yeah.
day.
There's people at work that I'm working with on Bob's now that were like, "You worked on Jimmy Neutron? Love that
So
show when I was a kid."
legend, legend. Bob's Burgers. How'd you get into that? And I know that you were living here, obviously, when we were working on Jimmy, and then you eventually moved out to California.
Mhm.
I love it. My kids watch it. What's that like? And what's your role on the show?
It's a great show. I'm really grateful to be on it. I got the job by an accidental chance, back in 2011. I'd been out of work for a while. I was having trouble. First time in my life, couldn't find a job. And I got an email from the production manager there, Ryan Corbett, great guy. Said someone had recommended me to him. He needed a board artist to start right away. And I said, I'll be there Monday, first thing Monday morning. And I was still living in Orange County at the time. So I had a 90-mile commute each way to go up there to work. And I didn't know anything about the show except a couple colleagues that had actually worked at DNA, Sandra Frame and Mario Dana
Oh yeah.
working there. And didn't know what the show looked like, didn't know anything about it. And uh, they put me on the board team with a director that was pretty tough and didn't like anything that I did. And it took me about a year to finally win her over and get,
Mm.
get into where she liked me.
You think that she was trying to test you and mold you into, her vision?
I guess
Or
maybe she was from Korea and, different kind of work ethic, I guess. Yeah, very demanding, but I improved a lot working under her and I thank her for that. Yeah, so it was kind of like a trial by fire my first few months there.
yeah, I
Uh,
think getting into the industry, when I was I was doing mostly television. I was doing some medical shows. I did some firefighting stuff for a company here in
mhm,
Dallas and broadcast stuff. It was a really good way of working on a wide spectrum of content,
mhm,
both live action and also animation, motion graphics, kinetic typography. And I worked with all these different producers, and every producer had a different personality.
mhm,
And there were the ones that I really loved working with,
mhm,
and somebody in my early 20s, I'm trying to get into the business, right? My father
mhm,
just passed away, and I'm just trying to get in the business. I was working for a corporation at the time, and I was working at night from 5 p.m. to 3 a.m. And,
mhm,
and that was my shift. But before, as I was showing up at 5, the producers, I had to go in and go over the boards, go over all the information I was working on. But every one of them had a different personality. Some of them were just mean as a snake.
mhm.
And I look back on that, and I'm actually glad that I experienced that. And I've got some standards on how I work and how I communicate with people, and show
Mhm,
people that I do care about what they're saying, while also, calling out and holding, those accountable when something's not quite right.
mhm.
But I'm all about building somebody up rather than tearing them down and then having to build them back up, right?
Yeah,
So I think that's an education in itself. I mean, I think Keith and John were two of the nicest, director and
yeah.
producers that you could
Things were
possibly
so
find.
easy at TNA.
So easy. Yeah, so easy. Yeah. Oh my gosh. They're so unbelievably kind.
Yeah.
I texted Keith today saying that you were going to be on the show, and he was so excited. We'll have to do a future show, all three of you on here, and it'd be great.
Well, Bob's is owned by, I guess, Disney and Fox, and,
Yeah,
it's a pretty strict corporate hierarchy there. I get along with all the directors well, and, continuing I've been there 14 years now and
that's
feel
amazing.
like I'm continually learning stuff and having to push myself and improve.
How many episodes are you guys doing now? Is there a little bit of a gap?
Usually we have time off in between seasons. They have shortened the seasons the last year to 15 episodes instead of 22.
Okay.
So, which means I have more time off in between, unfortunately. But at least the show's still popular. It's still going, and I'm still working. So I'm hope
Yeah,
I can stick with this show until I can retire.
I think in animation, people and in actors too, right? If you're not working on a film or a show and it's not in season, there's an employment gap, right?
Right.
And so I learned very early on, and I learned from the animators that had come from California to Texas to work here in Texas on the movie. You know, save your money, right? Save your money, because this is not forever. This is a
Mhm.
season, or this is a show,
Yeah.
and there's a gap. Sometimes it could be a month. Sometimes it can be a year. So on Bob's Burgers, is it the same type of thing? Are you considered contract or full time? Because tied to the corporation, Disney. How does that work?
Yeah.
If you're in between seasons, are you still considered full time?
They what they do is they kinda lay you off and then rehire you. This last break I had, they kept me on, but, then when you start the new season, you still have to sign all this paperwork and stuff. Our breaks can vary too from 3 weeks to 5 or 6 weeks. So I'm gonna
So
get
what do
it.
you do when you're not working? Are you being in California? There's so much to do. Do you ever
Yeah,
come back to Texas?
yeah, now I try to take some time off. My wife likes to travel, but I hate to travel. And I have my own projects that I work on. I have my own books. I have my YouTube channels and all that kind of stuff.
So tell us about your YouTube channel, because I love it, and it reminded me of, and I don't know if it was you or Keith, but somebody one day had said, "Hey, bring up your old, your first demo reel, and we're going to watch them in the theater, in the the retakes room, that little theater that was there." And we
Yeah.
all looked at our old demo reels, and they were so bad. But I just remember some of that animation and looking at the stuff that Keith was talking about. He sent me a couple of links, but just so nostalgic. What's motivating you to do that, and what's some of the connections you're making with those that are fans of the
Yeah.
YouTube channel?
I actually have 3 channels, but the main one is the, DFW cartoon show. I have all my old demo reels, my student films, so people can look at the 8 millimeter stuff I did as a kid, and, I got, several old DNA demo reels on there. I've been putting up old, Jimmy Neutron storyboards, uh, just making little videos about, different projects from DNA that like were never completed or that never got finished. Some background stuff on Ant Bully and Jimmy Neutron. And what surprised me is I only have a few hundred subscribers. I'm hoping to get more. So if people go to the channel, please subscribe. DFW Cartoon Show.
DFW Cartoon Show on
Yeah.
YouTube. Check it out.
But one of the old DNA demo reels has, last time I checked, it was like 70,000 views
It's
compared
pretty
to the,
amazing. Yeah, the people
yeah, the
people
other
love the
films only
show.
have maybe, a few dozen views or maybe a few hundred views, maybe 1,000 views. This one, like, it must have hit the algorithm jackpot or something.
Yeah, yeah. And there's some Johnny Quasar stuff on there, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
I've on the old Johnny Quasar stuff and test films on there. Yeah.
I remember when the first trailer came out, and I just started, and then we were working on the shots that ended up in the next trailer, and just the jump in some of those scenes that were being shown in the theater. And I think John and Keith took us down to the local theater right there
Hmm.
outside of Irving, and watched that trailer for the first time. Just was amazing. And I think it was the trailer that started with the Air Force Base. We got a bogey,
Yeah.
shot. It was that particular trailer. It was really amazing to see, like, oh my gosh, my work is being shown on that screen. And just everybody was so happy to see it. And because there were seasoned veteran artists and animators, but
Hmm.
then there were a lot of us that were in early career, and we had so much responsibility. I remember I was telling Keith, my lighting director gave me my first shots, and it was like, go.
Hmm.
And that's when I met you, because I remember walking into that room, which was right on the other side of the ping pong room, and the ping pong table was.
Yeah.
And I'd walked in there, and you had, I believe, a Planet of the Apes poster up on the wall, and some of the one sheets that you had been drawing that we ended up getting and that everybody signed. Still have those. But I walked in there, and you showed me the storyboards, and you showed me, I think it was the cave scene with Sheen, with the skeleton that was chained up on the wall. That was my
Uh,
very first shot, and you walked me through the colors, that cave needed to be, and
mhm.
that right there was like, oh, I got this. I can do this. And you just described it so well, and I went off to the races, and it was great. But yeah,
Yeah.
that's how I met you. That
Did you
was it.
know Paul Chang?
I did. Yeah, I'm friends with him now. His paintings his paintings now are incredible. Yeah, Paul sat right behind me in the lighting
Well,
area.
yeah, okay, yeah, he switched over to lighting later on.
Yeah, he was amazing.
Paul introduced me to my wife.
Really? That's fantastic. Where is he living now? Is he in California? Is he still here in Texas?
I'm not sure, I haven't talked to him for a while. He was in Vegas for a while working for a big gaming company, but his family was still here in California in Orange County,
Okay.
and I think he moved back when COVID hit, and I
Mm.
don't know if he's still there or not. I need to
I see
con
his paintings pop up on Instagram and Facebook quite a bit. His Western paintings,
Yeah,
Native American paintings, they're just
uh,
unbelievable.
yeah,
And I
he's a painting
remember,
machine.
yeah, and he would paint, you know, digital paintings, like matte
Uh-huh.
paintings and all that kind of stuff. And I would see
Yeah.
him do that. And it was so inspirational because every day I got to see him work on something new. And
Huh?
then, years later, you're seeing him making these, I think these Ping in oil, and they're beautiful. I mean,
Yeah.
Paul Chang is the real deal. Yeah,
He
he
did a
is.
portrait of me and gave it to me not too long ago. Big
Wow.
portrait.
How big is it?
It's like about 2 feet tall. It's pretty
And he
big.
probably painted it about 10 minutes.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
just so good.
Well, he did it for like practice, and yeah, gave it to me not too long ago, and I got it hanging in the house here.
That's great. I remember seeing some of the early art and the stuff you guys just did kind of for fun of the various
Hmm.
characters. And there were some spoofs that you were drawing based on some other movies. And they were one sheets, and they weren't the official one sheets that came out, but there was what's the real famous movie that came out that was like super hyper realistic, and you guys did kind of a version of that movie. I'm trying to remember the name at the top of my head. Final Fantasy.
I boarded a pilot for some Japanese company just before I went to work on Bob's Burgers, and I think that director directed one of the Final Fantasy movies.
Really,
Yeah,
you guys had a collaborative culture and a sense of family, and it was very obvious. It was really very fun to watch. I just remember you guys
yeah.
having a lot of fun
Hmm.
with everything, which is great.
Yeah, it was a pretty casual atmosphere there.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It wasn't. There were stressful days. Absolutely, there were stressful
Yeah,
days.
people were sleeping by their desks to get
Yeah. Oh,
screwed
yeah. And then
over.
finally the cots in the back. There were those bunk beds in the back by the modeling department. I remember that because I'd gone to college, undergrad at North Texas with Chris Tran, and
Yeah.
he had worked on all of the other reindeer, and I was still dealing, with my family stuff with my father, passing away. And I remember interviewing with Kim and Keith and John in the old location,
Mhm.
and Chris had interviewed for, I think they were internships, and I ended up having to give it up and not move forward. I was so happy for Chris, when he got hired, because I couldn't afford, because I was helping my mom, and it was just a chaotic time. But I remember that, and then working on Jimmy Neutron and working with somebody that I'd gone to school with, and then you start to see the other connections that other artists had, across studios, the people at Pixar, DreamWorks coming in and talking about shows they had worked on. The South Park crew that was there, one of the render wranglers in the back that was in charge of the rendering farm, talked about that. But there were so many stories, and it was almost overwhelming. As a young artist myself at that time, it was almost overwhelming because it's like the kid in the candy store. You just don't know what to not look at, right, or listen to, or it was just this fun house. So just amazing. As a kid, and you had all these various influences and stop motion, and I'm assuming you probably watched Looney Tunes and all the
Yeah, I
cartoons
was
that
a
we all
big
we all
Looney
did. Yeah, Looney Tunes was just so clever. Of course, incredibly violent,
funny. They were
but
funny.
hilarious.
I like
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. There were episodes and shows that a kid's probably not supposed to understand or get,
Mhm.
but then you watch them again, you're like, oh my gosh, that is hilarious. Bugs Bunny saying something, or Marvin the Martian, or
Yeah.
Pepe Le Pew. It was just so funny. Those were my favorite. But you also worked on, and I don't know the year, but you also worked on a Pac-Man cartoon at one point,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, that was for that Japanese company.
Wow. What year was that?
The director had worked on one of the Final Fantasy films.
Okay, so that was later on, because there was a Pac-Man cartoon in the 80s
Mhm.
that was developed. I can't remember. Maybe Hanna-Barbera did that
Yeah.
that version of, maybe, don't quote me on that. But
Yeah.
what were you doing on Pac-Man and some of those other projects, either before or after Jimmy Neutron? Were you still drawing from some of those roots as a kid and bringing them into those new environments that had the technology, had all the bells and whistles, and the software and the digital tablets? I'm not sure if Cintiqs were even out yet,
Yeah, I
at
didn't
that
have any
point.
of that at the time.
So what was that like? And were you pulling from some of that inspiration on some of those other shows?
Yeah, basically, on Pac-Man, they just had a loose script, They didn't have any designs or anything done yet. So I boarded just part of the pilot episode, rough boards. And actually, I did a video for my channel with the boards and created my own soundtrack for it because I didn't have any audio or anything. I
So
just had,
are you turning those into animatics, your storyboards, or is
yeah,
there another
yeah.
department? Okay.
In the animatics, I guess something changed hands there and they did a complete rewrite with it because the finished episode that I worked on is on YouTube, and it's quite a bit different. And the characters' designs are very different
Really?
than what I did. I had boarded, but my boards look fine. They work.
The value of a storyboard and, looking at a script and coming up with this scene, how much control are there guardrails that you're following based on the director or the producer? What's that process like when you're trying to get in the zone, head down, and developing the storyboard for the first time?
Yeah, you're just working off the script, and hopefully you have a soundtrack to work with. When we did boarded Neutron, we didn't have any audio or anything, so we were just boarding very loosely to the script. And then when you get the audio, you're like, "Ah, we had this. I would have staged stuff a lot differently and
Mm,
added more drawings here and there, so it would flow better." On the other hand, on Bob's, we get audio and usually get to see a table read of the episode long before we start boarding it, so we have a good idea of what it's going to sound like. And our boards for Bob's are very detailed. They're not just boards, they're layouts too. For I'm drawing on a Cintiq with Storyboard Pro. It's a Toon Boom program, which is
okay.
pretty standard in the industry now for that. We were doing that for Barnyard and Planet Sheen to
Oh
draw.
yeah, I remember it when I was with iStation. I ran the marketing and media division there, and I believe the animators used Toon Boom. And
Yeah.
at first, they did not have Cintiqs, and then it started to gradually enter the departments. But I'm pretty sure the main artists were using Toon Boom. A pretty incredible a tool.
Yeah, we started using that in back in 7 or so on Barnyard, and they just gave us the equipment and said, "Start." No training or nothing. And luckily, I don't know if you remember Jason Dorf. He was
I
another,
do. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
He
yeah.
he had a lot of experience with Photoshop, and he was like, "Oh, yeah, some of this is kind of like Photoshop." We started figuring it out, and then finally, we had to tell him, "Look, have someone give us a little training seminar on this so we can get going." And we couldn't even calibrate the Cintiqs or anything. We had no idea how to do that.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible, especially now with like iPads and various technologies. But Cintiqs, I used to have the really large one, and I'd moved and sold it. But just the technology and very expensive piece of equipment, but just it was like driving a Ferrari.
Yeah,
Just
yeah.
incredible.
Yeah, so they gave us like a hour and a half seminar finally. Someone from Toon Boom came out and
Oh,
then
wow.
took off from there. We had to just hit the road running.
So was it Barnyard, that you were when you were first using a Cintiq, or were you using it
Yeah,
before that?
it was on Barnyard, yeah.
I almost worked on that movie, and I'd modeled one of the tractors.
Yeah,
I think was it Toke that went to Barnyard? I
Ron,
think it was,
yeah,
yeah, it's Toke Braun. Always loved him, and
mhm,
he was interviewing me, and I cannot remember. There was some timing here in Dallas, and they were, it was near what, San Diego, San Clemente, is that right?
uh-huh,
Was it where it was? Yeah, and I almost went to go work on that, and something happened here and ended
mhm,
up not being able to. But that was a really, I thought that was a really funny movie, and I know that there are
yeah,
people that love Jimmy and probably had never seen Barnyard, but I thought there were some really funny
mhm,
lines in that movie. I loved it.
yeah, and I thought Planet Sheen was gonna be good too. It's a shame that that fell apart.
He was my favorite character.
Yeah,
Jimmy, yeah.
yeah,
Sheen was absolutely my favorite character. Yeah.
yeah, for the
Yeah.
guy did the voice, blanking on his name, passed away not too long ago.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah. I loved listening when you were talking about the audio. I loved getting the shots. Lighting director comes in, or the assistant lighting director and gives you the list of shots, and it could be 5 at a time or it could be 15 at a time.
Mhm.
And I would go into the folders on the server, and there'd be the audio of Martin Short or Patrick Stewart or some of the other voice actors. It was so fun to have your headphones on and you're trying to imagine what this scene would look like, and then looking at your boards
Mhm.
and trying to match that. And it just started coming together. And you
Mhm.
started painting this picture using technology and in lighting and special effects. And I joke about it when I'm directing a shoot or and dealing with physical lights. Uh, there are things that I don't want that light to hit that particular object. And in animation, you can literally tell that light, don't hit that object. Turn this off, turn that on. And it was so fun to do that. But listening to the voices and having that scene come together, I would find myself, laughing,
Mhm.
on some of those scenes. When you're working on Bob's Burgers, are you drawing and you kind of find yourself chuckling, or is it all business and you're just trying to, get through that part of the
No,
script?
they have such a great voice cast on that show, and, yeah, there's lines that are just really funny, and you're just going, "Oh, I hope they don't cut this line, it's really funny." And one there time, Eugene Merman ad-libbed a line, which did get cut, unfortunately, and it was so funny. As every time I'd hear it 100 times, and it would crack me up every time. It was a little off color, but that's one thing I love working on Bob's is the, table reads. I always try to
Oh,
go
yeah.
to
I bet those would be fantastic to sit
no,
back and watch those. Yeah.
yeah, although half the cast is on, a speakerphone, and some of the cast is there, like, Kristen Shaw is usually, us some of the secondary characters are usually there,
Oh, that's great.
and it's all, like, really good comedians and stuff that come in and do that.
Mhm.
I remember one
And they've
time they
got guests, right? Guest comedians that come in and do,
had Cloris
guest
Leachman
appearances.
there one time,
What's that?
and Cloris Leachman,
Oh, yeah. Yeah, yeah,
the
yeah.
actress from, Young Frankenstein, she was there in person, and, she was great. She did some really funny ad libs, and then they had, Henry Winkler there one time,
Wow.
and, yeah, it's such a great
So do you get
cast.
a chance to meet some of them, or are you, in your illustration storyboard cave, or do you get to interact with some of them? I know that, Keith has talked about some of the conversations he's had with various actors and actresses over the years, but do you have some that you get a chance to talk with, and whether it's
Not
about the show
really.
or
I met Kristen Shaw and, Eugene Merman, like, basically saying hi to them, and occasionally you run into them in the break room, they're getting coffee or something
it's a
when they're in
job, right? You're
here
there
to
and you're at work.
yeah, yeah. So, they always say hello, but
What were some of the
faster.
challenges that you were having, as let's go back to maybe middle school, high school, trying to get in the industry. And again, the technology was not even close to what it was on Jimmy or even now.
Mhm.
What were some of the challenges that you faced over the years? And you can go wherever you want, with this, as far as, was it work? Was it trying to get in the industry because it was real difficult? Because I know when I was trying to get in, it was hard just to get in the door.
Yeah.
And there were no schools that were teaching it, right? Animation, 3D
Mhm.
animation. We had a society at UNT called Absolutely No Degree Computer Animation Society. And we
Yeah.
started that, and that's how all of us met. That's how I met Chris. That's how I met John.
Uh-huh.
And we started that society, and we literally taught ourselves Softimage and 3ds Max, 3D Studio before it was the Max.
Mhm.
We had a professor there that had some software, but there was no degree, and we were traditional art and design people. I was a fine arts major, sculpture particularly because the modeling, but there were a lot of challenges just trying to get your first job in, whether it's broadcast, animation, film, TV, whatever it is. What are some of those challenges that you faced just trying to desperately get in the door?
Yeah, there were really no schools. I think SMU had a film and video program, but there's no way I could afford to go to SMU. I went to North Texas and Denton for 1 year. They had a program there the year I went, and, uh, the first semester was, you had to make a Super 8 film, and second
Yeah, it was the
semester.
RTVF program.
Yeah, you had to make a 16 millimeter film, so I have those up on my channel, and then I went back the next year to sign up, and the film classes were gone.
Ugh,
They canceled them. I guess they didn't have enough people or funding for it. But ironically, my dad had a construction company that I worked for during the summer and in between school and stuff. And he got contracted to install movie screens at NTSU for the football department. They had this big room with individual little booths, and each booth had a 16 millimeter projector and a screen, and they had all kinds of camera equipment, everything. But it was for the football team, so they could
it was
film
all
their
for
football
the
game.
game footage. All the players would watch it.
Yeah,
Wow.
they had tons of stuff, like really nice equipment and everything. The film department didn't even have a projector. They had to borrow a projector from the English department to look at our films.
Wow. Yeah, there was we had I love I loved my time there. There was a lot of creativity going on, but absolutely funding was an issue. And they ended up was the movie Necessary Roughness was filmed at UNT. And I went there when it was UNT, and when you were there was North Texas State University,
Huh?
NTSU, and they changed the brand. But I remember having conversations with the university leadership because I there was a couple of newspaper articles. One was like I think in the Fort Worth Star Telegram, and the other was actually was three North Texas Daily, and then I think the Denton Record Chronicle. I think all
Mhm,
three of those did a story on us. And I remember having a conversation with leadership, and this was like the chancellor, and the provost, and the president, and it was a coffee essentially, and you get to talk about your interests, and there was zero interest in funding anything related to animation, and I
mhm,
always thought it was a miss because just a few years later, A&M had started their Viz Lab, and it was a graduate program. And I think they probably had some undergraduate classes, but Viz Lab was taken off, and people from California, like Industrial Light and Magic, Lucasfilm, they were looking at that program and recruiting talent. I remember seeing TV shows, but yeah, UNT did not have the funding back then. And then all of a sudden, people realized, okay, we gotta start paying attention to this technology. And look at now. I mean, with AI and all the things that kids can learn,
yeah,
not only in college, but like you said, YouTube. There's just so much there.
yeah, yeah. Look up anything on YouTube now and learn how to do it. Anything.
There it is. Yeah, there it is. What were some of the other challenges you faced on adapting to the various productions over the years? And when did you start kind of getting your crew, your people that you could rely on and ask questions? Maybe they were working on a different production. Were you ever reaching out to people saying, "Hey, how are you dealing with this particular shot? What's your creative process like?"
Well, the guy I worked with at K&H, Dave Hamby, was really into experimenting with stuff and testing things out. We were doing a lot of very technically difficult motion graphics kind of stuff. Like the local news channel wanted, logo with like chrome letters flying through space with lasers and stuff. Yeah, that kind of stuff. So it was
Wow.
all involved like slit scans and creating all this kind of what we call juicy looking chrome lettering, unlit light and
Like the old
jet
HBO,
fresh.
HBO intro, the
Yeah,
nostalgic.
yeah, we were doing that kind of stuff on the Oxberry, and K&H at the time had one of the first computer motion controlled Oxberries in the Southwest, and the computer ran on reels of black paper tape that you had to load on, and it would like spin back and forth, and the tape had holes punched in it. I don't know who was programming that stuff. I would just load it up and set up the camera and the artwork and get it to do its thing, make sure the exposures were right and all that. And that was hair raising work because I'd be working there all night, sometimes till 3 in the morning, shooting stuff. And it had to be to the lab that night and back the next day to meet the deadline.
Quick
And that
turnaround.
was like pretty hair raising work. I know Keith did a lot of the same kind of work too.
Yeah, he mentioned it. Do you remember a company called Prime Media in Dallas?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was my first introduction to like broadcast and production. And that was that job I was referring to. And I worked at 5 p.m. to 3 a.m. working with all those different producers. I worked there for a couple of years and I learned a lot. It was amazing, but
Hmm.
I had a lot of just drudgery jobs, and some of them were broadcast and some of them were not. But I learned to be appreciative of what I
Hmm.
got, because if I did a good job on a show or a production that wasn't the fancy, all flashy or the sexy production, but I did a good job and I developed a relationship with that producer, I then got a better job and I got
Hmm.
a better project. And I just remember doing that because then there's a trust that happens. And I think that's incredibly important. That how are you reacting when somebody asks you to do something that's not going to be fun? And you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
some of this, like I think I was scanning in old 1970s glass slides from a medical show.
Hmm.
And I won't go into detail, but they were some pretty gnarly images. And I had to take every slide out of the box and
Hmm.
put that in the scanner, scan them in, then throw them in Photoshop and color correct them,
Hmm.
and then load them up, to a server. And then those would become, either motion graphics, illustrations, infographics, all kinds of stuff for shows, live shows. And I remember I was like, this is awful. And I bet there were 500 slides I had to go through
Hmm.
for that one thing. But I
Yeah.
did a good job and I got a better job. And then I
Hmm.
got put on a firefighter show. And those were some challenges being in my early 20s. That was, there were many moments I'm sure that, hey, I'm going to quit. I don't like this. But I'm glad I did that work. And I just remember gaining the trust of those producers. And there were some producers there that were not very nice. And they just thought you had to tear you down before we could do anything good. And that was just not the case. But I learned a lot there. When did you start to have an impact on other people? People that said, "Hey, Paul, can teach me this?" Were you doing that at all along the way, and people would see your talent and your work ethic, and were you taking your time to maybe teach them something or give them a little bit of advice? Because I know that Keith certainly would. There were other people that we worked with that would. But what was that like for you? Whether any of the shows that you worked on, what was that dynamic?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I've had like a huge impact on people. I'm very introverted and I just keep my head down and do my own work and stuff. Of course, if people ask me a question on I'm very happy to help them out. I I kind of helped Mike Judge a little bit. I met him. I was shooting something at the Stokes studio on their Oxbury, and he was there looking at the camera and kind of introduced each other and stuff. And he was telling me, yeah, I was thinking about renting this camera because I wanted to make these cartoons and stuff. And I said, well, I can kind of show you how to work it and that. And so he says, hey, do you mind if I watch what you're going to shoot? So I said, yeah, sure. So I started doing the work and he'd ask me a few questions here and there. And then he was asking me, hey, where can I buy animation cells and cell paints and all that kind of stuff? And I told him about Cartoon Color Company where we ordered our supplies from. And we just kind of struck up a friendship from there. He would come over to my house every once in a while because I had a 16 millimeter projector and he'd look at his films on that he had shot. And he'd call me up once in a while and say, hey, how do you do this on the Oxbury? How do I get it to do that? Oh, okay, you got to do this and this and this, and then,
And all of a sudden, it turns into Beavis and Butthead. I remember Keith and I
yeah,
were talking about this. I remember
yeah.
Mike Judge had walked up behind me and I was working on a shot and I did not know he
Hmm.
was there. I
Hmm.
just remember turning around and he was standing there with Keith and John,
Hmm.
and incredibly nice,
Yeah,
incredibly
Mike's
nice.
super nice, really smart guy too.
So smart, so
Yeah,
kind. But I can't imagine, you know,
I think he has like a physics degree or something like that.
really.
Yeah,
Wow,
he's a really sharp guy.
that's incredible. Yeah. Thinking back, you helping him and teaching him how to use a camera, and all of a sudden I mean, Beavis and Butthead was everywhere. And then Hank
Yeah, and his
Hill.
films were so good; they were so funny and everything.
Yes. I would love my favorite shows to watch in college were Beavis and Butthead on MTV when the M's stood for music, right? but they'd have Beavis and Butthead episodes, and then there was Eon Flux and a lot of
Yeah,
those late night animations. I loved
sure.
Eon Flux; just was so creative. But thinking back during that time for you when you were teaching him how to animate and use that equipment, it's got to be a little surreal, right? I mean, it's Mike
Yeah.
Judge. This is
Yeah, I remember he was on, Letterman show one night, and he called me up before it was on, and I wasn't home, so he just left a message on my machine. He was like, "Hey, I'm gonna be on Letterman tonight if you wanna watch it. Bye." And that was it. I was like, "What?"
is this the one that where he does some of the voices in the interview and they're talking to him?
Yeah, yeah, and I
Yeah,
could
I've
tell he
seen
was
that.
real nervous on the show. He comes walking
Yeah.
out like, it's like,
How's it going?
"Wow."
Yeah. Oh, great. That's so
Yeah, I
funny.
wonder if I still have that tape. I'll have to see if I can find, 'cause,
You'll have
my
to
answering,
reference it. Yeah, I
yeah,
have to reference it, tell that
cassette
story
tapes had,
on your channel.
my answering machine that he left the message on, used cassette tapes. I may still have that tape somewhere.
Wow, yeah. Oh, yeah, you'll have to dig that out.
Yeah,
"Hey, Paul, I'm going on Dave Letterman show. Be sure to watch."
yeah,
I do remember seeing that interview. I know it's on YouTube. I've looked it up, yeah, back,
mhm.
yeah, maybe a year ago or so.
Figured out how to use the Oxberry himself just from me just showing him a few things.
When did he get confidence to where you weren't getting phone calls, or did he always involve you when he was coming up with
Yeah, he was
I
always
mean,
showing me what he did. Was at his house a few times and see his artwork and stuff.
he
And
lived in Garland, right? Wasn't he in Garland?
Richardson, yeah,
Richardson. Yeah,
yeah,
Richardson.
and his wife, and
Wow.
he just had a baby at the time, and um,
Making 2
he was
silly
playing a
characters.
blues band with Doyle Bramhall, who was a
Wow.
friend of Stevie Ray Vaughan.
Whoa.
Doyle played the drums and I think sang, and they were a professional band. They I think he only toured around Texas so he could stay near his family, and Mike was his bass player.
Wow. I was just at Charlie's Guitar Shop about a week ago, and, I've been doing
Yeah,
some
great
work for
guitar
them.
shop.
Incredible. I do some refinishing. I started refinishing guitars for them about 10
Mhm.
years ago for Bryant. And
Uh-huh.
I'm not an employee, but I've got my guitar and woodworking side business that I love. And you go in that guitar shop and there's so much history and
Mhm.
there's some Stevie Ray Vaughan and you kind of see old school Dallas and old school, just that time and that music. And there's some magic marker Sharpie messages on some of the photographs. But that's an amazing place. I did not know that Mike Judge was in a blues band.
Yeah, he's
But
good friends with Doyle Bramhall. He used to put
wow,
me in the guest list. Say, "Hey, we're playing at such and such in Deep Ellum night." Yeah, go down there and see him. And
Deep
he's
Ellum.
speaking of Stevie Ray Vaughan, I used to see him and his brothers in Austin when I lived down there back in '83 or so. Right around the time Stevie Ray's career took off, he did that Bowie album.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I saw him in a grocery store once, saw him in a guitar shop once. And
Wow.
those things where he walks in and everyone in the guitar store drops what they're doing and runs over there to it's like,
Talk
"Can
with
you
him,
use
get his
what?"
autograph, and yeah. "Can I
Yeah.
help you?" Yeah, yeah. Wow. And I'm sure he was incredibly nice. All the interviews, it seems like he was very
Yeah,
nice
he
and
seems
very
like a real
invent
down to
yeah,
earth guy.
yeah. It's
And
almost like
his
Eric
brothers were like
Johnson.
that too.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah, Eric Johnson, he was at our Guitar Center here in Dallas one point. I
Mhm.
just missed him, but I remember talking to a gentleman that had gone to meet him, just said he was incredibly kind. Favorite moments in your career, whether it's now, over the past 14 years, you working on Bob's Burgers, or is it your personal stuff? I mean, looking at your portfolio of work, what are the highlights that you look back and, you're proud of that trophy on the shelf? What is that one thing? And I know that, we were Oscar nominated on Jimmy Neutron for that movie. That was so magical to experience. Could not believe that. But what are some of those moments for you throughout your career? And tell us that story.
Yeah, well, yeah, Neutron was certainly a lot of fun, and, so many fans of that show reach out to me and stuff, tell me how much they liked it. That's always great. I got to work on a Pink Panther, uh,
Wow.
cartoon. Yeah, it's Pink
What year
Panther.
was that?
That was in 2010. It was just before I went to work on Bob's, And one of the other board artists was the wife of someone that is a director on Bob's. So there's a connection there. But that was a lot of fun. Always wanted to work on a famous cartoon character. So that was an
Yeah,
op-
I loved Pink Panther as a kid,
yeah,
and
it was fun
anytime it
little
was on
project.
TV, yeah, there were no DVRs, right? Oh, I'm gonna go and record it and come back.
Yeah.
We had to wait, right? I just remember when Pink Panther came on,
Hmm.
it was like seeing a unicorn, you know, it's like,
Yeah.
okay. Or like Rocky and Bullwinkle, you know,
Yeah.
all of those great animations.
Hmm.
Saturday morning cartoons were awesome, but I did like Pink Panther quite a bit. So
Yeah. It was a Christmas special. It's on YouTube now. I think it's just called the Pink Panther Christmas special.
awesome. I have to go check it out for sure. What else? What are some of the other things that you worked on that you just were very proud of?
Well, of course, Bob's. I'm real proud of working on Bob's. So, and it's a good way to top off the career, I think.
What's, kind of your next chapter? I know you mentioned retirement earlier, but how long do you want to do this and what do you want to do next? And what advice do you have for people? I mean, you have a very solid foundation regarding your career development over the
Hmm.
years from non-technology, old school stuff to this very sophisticated now going into AI. What's the future look like, for you and where do you think it's going?
Well, I hope I can keep working on Bob's for a couple more years. I don't know what I'm going to do after that. As retirement's going to look like. I have, books and stuff I'd like to work on, and still doing videos for the channels and stuff. As far as technology goes, technology for Bob's hasn't changed that much since I've been working on it. We get Toon Boom upgraded every couple of years. So there's always a few adjustments to that. It's never better. It's just a little more. Like the version we were using like about 10 years ago is like the best version for
You're
what
like,
we
oh,
do.
that's what that button does.
Yeah. It's like we're, but um, as far as what tell young people coming up, yeah, right now is a tough time in the industry. A lot of studios are closing. There's not a lot of work right now. AI hasn't really taken over anything yet, as far as I can tell. I mean, obviously, there's some things are being done with it, and I know people have plans to be using it, but I think it's still in that developmental stage.
So, Paul, Keith Alcorn just texted me. And I had texted him earlier saying that I was interviewing you, today for episode 6. And he wants me to ask you a question. He goes, if you get this text while you're still interviewing, then please ask him this question. What is it like being one of the greatest animators that ever lived? That's such a Keith question. So what's your answer to that? What's it like being the greatest animator that ever lived?
Well, since I started working on Bob's, I realized I am not the greatest animator that ever lived. People I work with and work for there run circles around me, and I can barely keep up. So, which is good because it makes me work harder at being better.
Well, I think Keith thinks you're the greatest animator that ever lived.
Well, Keith is a sweetheart.
He is a sweetheart. Well, it just shows the impression that you had on him and just that the dynamic in the relationships that you established with him and John Davis back in the day and being the first DNA employee. There's history there and that shows. And there's humor in that, right? That's a total Keith Alcorn question.
Same.
That's
Yeah,
great.
Keith is like a big brother to me.
I consider him a mentor. And I don't know if you listened to that episode, I had the opportunity to work with him again at an educational technology company here in Dallas. And
Great.
he came in and that was just surreal, magical because he came in and everybody knew who he was. And he came in just with really good, solid leadership and direction and really helped a department when we were transitioning and growing and trying to come up with new product. And he just brought a new sense of energy into that studio. And it was really fun to watch. So I did get a chance to work with him again. You turn on endless entertainment, whether it's
Hmm.
Apple TV or whatever you have, any streaming app. There's so many of them.
Hmm.
And when you look at Netflix and Apple TV and Apple movies that are coming out, um, Amazon Prime movies. Seems like there's just a treasure trove of productions to work on. But then you
Mhm.
mentioned that people aren't working. What do you think's going on there? I know that some animation and some of the work that you do, and even the animation stuff that I was doing, that's gone overseas into various
Yeah.
countries.
Unfortunately, people who are running the state right now, and the city here make it so difficult and expensive to do production here in California
In
that it's
California.
all being outsourced.
Yeah. Mm,
And they get tax incentives and stuff for going out of state and out of country.
yeah,
So that needs to
it's
change.
unfortunate. Yeah.
Yeah,
Do you think it'll come back? I was in California in September to see Oasis with one of my sons. It was
yeah,
amazing. We drove around, quite a bit, looking at some of
hmm
the historic sites and
yeah,
production studios. I showed my son where Disney was, and
hmm
but do you think it's going to come back to California? Because there's what, a couple miles in Burbank, there's a production studio, and you go down to Hollywood, there's always some place where something's being created, but then stuff's being produced overseas.
My house, I can walk to Nickelodeon, Disney, Warner Brothers, Cartoon Network, and DreamWorks are just across the freeway. And there's tons of other little studios all around this area. Burbank's a hotbed. And the old NBC studio where they filmed the Johnny Carson show and
Hmm.
Hollywood Squares is walking distance from my house.
Wow.
They don't do any production there anymore. I think it's a gaming company that's in there now.
There's just so much there, and I was explaining that
Yeah.
to my son Jude, and we'd gone up to Griffith Park, right, observatory,
Mhm.
and talked about, James Dean, and
Yeah.
just had a great day. It was a very good father-son trip. It was very quick. It was a couple
Yeah.
days, and, when you're teenagers, like, "Oh, I don't wanna talk to my dad," but
Mm.
he does appreciate the things that he was seeing as we were waiting to go to the show, and there's a thunderstorm outside. I'm in Dallas,
Yeah, I
and so
can
you
hear
probably
thunder.
remember this. Yeah, so it's coming back through, so if we lose power, that's what it is. But yeah, he had a really great tour, and I talked about various productions that were being made. He saw some logos and signage that he obviously sees online and on TV. But do you think it's gonna come back?
I hope so. I hope so. I'm really hoping that, we'll soon have better management in the state soon that'll give incentives for businesses to do the work here instead of shipping it out. But
Yeah.
I don't know. It's kind of up in the air right now. And
Yeah, and I don't know which productions right now, like on Netflix and Apple TV, which ones there. Probably all of them have
yeah,
outsourced
I
artists. And
I still see production around town. You used to see it a lot. I'm right near a high school, and Disney's always shooting one of their live action shows out in front of there. And then there's a nice park right around the corner from me where I see productions going on. They have the service trucks and stuff parked in the parking lot there. They filmed the Twin Peaks segment at the grocery store across from our old office, and I see productions going on at various places in the neighborhood all the time. So there's still some production going on. I just know a lot of people, a lot of work right now, and people are really worried about their jobs and stuff.
when I was talking with Keith, I had your name written down. I was like, I want to interview Paul Claerhout. I want to interview him,
Well, thank
and
you.
maybe in the future, absolutely. In the future, I want to get you, John, and Keith on an episode and just
Yeah.
listen to you guys tell your stories. That'd be great. Your YouTube channels, go ahead and plug those really quick.
Well, of course, there's the DFW cartoon show we mentioned before. It's all my animation content. And then I have the DFW rock show, which you may be interested in since you're into guitars and stuff. My brother and I used to sneak that movie camera into rock concerts when back in the 70s. And I had them digitized. And a couple years ago, I started putting them up on YouTube, and a couple other collectors saw it. And they said, they were like, hey, we dub audio into these films, 8 millimeter films, because, that camera doesn't have audio. and it's a wind-up motor, so it only shoots like 10 or 20 seconds at a time. So we get bootleg live recordings and dub audio into it and sync it up. Well, they did that with some of our films, and it looks like it's the real audio,
Oh, that's
even though it's
great. Yeah.
a different concert from the same tour, but a different night.
What are some of the bands, just real quick?
We have Led Zeppelin. We have spectacular footage of Led Zeppelin
Wow.
because we lucked out and got fourth row center seats for Led Zeppelin.
I'm gonna text that link to my band. I play in a band called OKOTB, Old Kids on the Block.
Uh huh.
I'm one of the drummers, and then I sing. I'll either lead sing or do some backup, and it's a great group of guys. They are going to love this. I cannot
Yeah.
wait to text them that link.
We
That's
got
great.
Zeppelin, Queen, Rush, a few other bands. We had to stop doing it after a while because the security at the concerts would be like, they didn't want you bringing that kind of equipment in there. We had to do it kind of on the slide. We'd have the camera under our jacket. So we'd like whip it out and line it up. Zeppelin was at Dallas Convention Center. Uh, we got two Queen films. One was at the Fort Worth Convention Center, and the other one was at McFarland at SMU.
I
Yeah, we got two Rush films, and
How close were you? Like, I get it. I'm so giddy right now to go watch this.
like I say, the Zeppelin footage is the best because we were fourth row. We saw Bad Company. I think we were about in the 15th
Wow.
row, so that's nice and clear and up close. Rush a little bit farther back, but you just zoom in. The camera has a zoom lens on it, so all the stuff looks great for 8 millimeter.
Wow.
Yeah, and these guys that dubbed the sound, they had us scan the films, and they paid for it and everything at a better resolution and stuff. So the films look spectacular now.
So okay, so you still have the originals and I mean, you film. Is it nitro or what is celluloid? What is the
Yeah,
film
it's
made
just
out of? Does it degrade?
I'm surprised they're in as good a shape as they were because my brother had them, and they've been in attic in Texas for 40 years. These films are almost 50 years old now. They're
That's
still in good
scary.
condition. The color's not faded. The films haven't shrunk or chewed up. There's some splices in them, some broken sprocket holes and stuff, but
But not
they're
melted
they're in
together and
great
just destroyed.
condition. Yeah,
Wow. I had no idea, Paul. That is fantastic.
yeah,
I cannot wait to watch this.
and then I was in a couple bands back in the '80s. I put I saved those recordings. I have them. I put them up, so you can hear
What'd you
them out.
play?
Bass.
Fantastic. John, who's our leader of our band, he's the bass. He can play guitar very, very well, and
Mhm,
can sing, but he's our bass player, and he's great. Always respect the bass player, being a drummer, right? At first, I was a singer first, and then had a hand-me-down kit that my sister's boyfriend gave me. That's how I got into music. But bass, do you still play today?
I have a bass. Unfortunately, I sold the bass I had back then. I had a nice mid-'70s era Fender P bass. And
Well,
stupidly sold it back in the '90s for
have
not
you ever seen? Yeah, what'd you sell it for? Before I ask you this question.
$100, and I've seen same bass in stores now going for like 2 or 3 grand.
But yeah, yeah. Let me tell you a story. Two different guitars. Still have one of them. And you mentioned the Texas Attic. About 2 years ago, and you may have seen this on my Instagram and my website, but the guy comes to me. They had gone to Charlie's, and Bryant at Charlie's, I'm the guy they call because they know my work. There's some guitars I won't even touch if it's, hey, my friend or my wife or my kid dropped the guitar, and if it's like a 59 Les Paul, you gotta love that ding because I'm not touching that.
Mhm,
Right. But there's certain guitars, like I've got a Telecaster outside. I'm repairing for a guy. It's repairing and refinishing is only about 10 or 15, 20% of my work because now I've got my own designs. I've been working on some prototypes for a while, and
mhm,
I've learned a lot, just being a woodworker, but then getting into guitars. But finishing is a foundation to really how I got into designing and building them.
mhm,
So the guy comes to me and he goes, I've got this guitar and it's covered in Krylon spray paint. It was like a teal green. And So he brings it to me and he goes, "It's covered in this paint. Can you do anything with it? It's just a lot of work." So he comes over and I'm looking at it. And sure enough, it's got probably 10 layers of like rattle
Mhm.
can Krylon paint. I'm like, I think this is a 1962 Fender Strat.
God.
And he goes, "Yeah, I think it is." He goes, "It was in his attic and Bryant worked on it. It's now, playable, but it was in his hot Texas attic." So I removed very carefully all of that Krylon. And it took me a long time because you don't want to introduce moisture into that wood. So there's a very
Mhm.
particular chemical that I use to remove it. And it started to reveal itself. But anyway, I was like, "Well, what color do you want this thing?" And I said, "Do you want it nitrocellulose?" He goes, "Yeah." He goes, "I really want this thing in shell pink, but I want it relicked." And there's some guitar enthusiasts out there and players like, "Oh, don't relic a guitar. I want it to
Mhm.
naturally age." But he wanted this thing to look like a 1962 because you paint a guitar, it's going to look brand new, right? It's going to look
Yeah.
like a new car that's painted. I said, "Absolutely. I can do relicking." And I said, "But send me like 10 different photographs of relics that you like, that are
Mhm.
real, that look legitimately worn. They're not fake. And then I'm going to duplicate that." And he sent me all this stuff. And he goes, "I want it in shell pink." So I contacted my supplier, Nitro. And no, nitrocellulose paint is not a durable paint at all. It actually destroys itself over time, degrades. And anyway, I painted this thing, refinished it, took it back up to Charlie's. And Bryant looks at it. He goes, "Do I know this guitar?" I was like, "You've seen this guitar." And it took me a good month and a half to get this whole thing done, maybe a little bit longer. And he's like, "I can't believe, is this that green, that teal green Strat?" I said, "Yeah." He goes, "Oh my gosh." He goes, "It looks like a custom shop guitar." But it was an attic find.
Uh-huh.
Not maybe a month later or so, a friend of mine comes to me, and you're going to appreciate this, being a musician and just loving art, comes to me and goes, "Hey, my parents," I went to high school with him. "My parents have this house and we found this guitar in the attic and it wasn't ours. And when I found out, it was the previous owners. And this thing had been living in the attic, like probably tucked away." And this is the story
Mhm.
he told me, "For the longest time." And I'm looking at it, looks like a late 1950s Gibson guitar. Right.
My
So he
God.
opens this thing up. Yeah. Opens this thing up and it is a Les Paul special and it's covered in spray paint. The P90 pickups are melted. The frets are worn. I mean, everything about this guitar. The only reason I knew that it was a real Gibson was the headstock and it was all checked, but everything else was pretty much melted, electronics, all of that. So I said, "What do you want to do with it?" He goes, I really want to get this paint off of it. And it's mahogany. And I don't even know what the original color was. So I turned it over. I was like, "This was, TV yellow. The original color, this was TV yellow," because you could see it in the control cavities. And took this whole thing apart, very slowly removed the paint. I'll put it on my TikTok and it's on my Instagram. So worked on that and I've got it downstairs, got it down to bare wood. And I took it up to Charlie's, probably about a year ago, about the time we moved over here.
Mhm.
And I asked them, I was like, "Hey, can you guys take a look at this? I think this is like a 1958, maybe 1960, 61, 62. Just take a look at it." So they took all the pictures and looked at it and sent it off. As of right now, it looks like a 1958 Gibson special,
Wow, what a
and
find.
it's unbelievable. So that's a long story, but I can't even describe, this guitar because it's worth, a good amount of money, and
Mhm.
probably for the right buyer. People aren't people Some people freak out when you refinish a guitar like that, but the two guitars I just described, they had to be refinished and restored because they were covered in spray paint,
Yeah.
and they don't even look like the same guitar.
Mhm.
They look like how they were originally built, other than, the one that Shell Pink is done, and he has it, lives in East Texas. But the Les Paul, I just talked to my friend a couple of weeks ago, and he's going to decide kind of what he wants to do with it. But I've got it very carefully stored inside, and it's amazing. But that's a piece of history, right? You- You're talking about you're selling your
Yeah.
your P bass.
Mhm.
Yeah, take a look at my social media. It's an
Yeah,
amazing.
I see your guitars posted on Facebook every now and then, so
Yeah. Thank you for that.
I love
Well,
seeing that.
listen,
I love seeing that stuff. Yeah.
thank you. I
Yeah,
appreciate
I
it.
love looking at guitar gear and stuff.
Thank you. Oh, it's amazing. And there's so many people out there. There's a lot of boutique guitar builders and they're
Mhm,
works of art. I mean, they're pieces of wood. I do remind people, it's like, hey, you're holding a piece of lumber.
mhm,
You've got to obviously follow a process from your building, and I've got a really nice CNC machine, but it's a piece of wood, and you have to treat it like a piece of wood because it's always moving, right? It's never stable, and you've got to pick good lumber, and you're going to get to a point where you're going to fail on that particular design or even refinishing, and you learn from that. And I just
mhm,
fell in love with it. I do enjoy it. So, well, Paul, we'll wrap this up. I'm grateful for your time. What advice do you have for people right now getting into the industry? Whether it's a college student or somebody who just gets inspired by watching Bob's Burgers, or just maybe it's a parent saying, "Hey, Paul, can you talk to my kid?" Knowing
mhm.
what we know about AI and all the tech, what would you tell the future artists and production people wanting to get in the business?
Just get some basic equipment you can make videos or films with. Well, videos now. And just start making films, start figuring out how to do it. Read some books on how to cut films together well and basic cinematography and stuff, and just start making films.
And
That's
putting it
that's
out there and how
yeah.
easy it is. I mean, you put it on YouTube and all of a
And
sudden
now
the
it's
world
so
can see
easy.
it.
Like I say, everyone's got one of these now. So
Mhm.
um, I make little videos about the gardens that I visit and stuff.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, I
Yeah,
mean, you're telling a story, right? I mean, there's so
yeah.
much to
It's
do
just
now.
telling a story. You're telling a visual image and stuff. And I just got a basic editing software on my home computer that I put everything together with, and it's a lot of fun, and it's so easy now
It's
too.
so easy. I mean, CapCut makes things so easy now, and
Yeah,
we're using Premiere and After Effects and all this stuff now. You grab your clips, and
yeah. I
it's
just use
just so
iMovie.
easy.
Came
Yeah,
with
or iMovie.
yeah, my iMac, and my other channel is the DFW Home Movie Matinee. This just personal stuff, home movies. Um, uh, I visit botanical gardens, and I'll make little videos about that. Now, I recently inherited my mom's boxes of old family photos, so I'm making little videos documenting family history and stuff. I did one recently on my grandparents' immigration story and stuff. Just
Wow,
short
wow,
10-minute videos on that stuff.
wow.
Far from Antwerp, they came,
Okay,
small town there, and they
wow,
went through Ellis Island. They're in the Ellis Island records and all that. So yeah, and
amazing.
had this.
Yeah, our family came through New York, New Jersey. The Roden side of the family
Mhm.
came down, so it's amazing. I love genealogy and history and just
Yeah,
those stories.
I
Incredible.
have pictures that are over 100 years old now, and been scanning them in and to preserve them. And I think, oh, I can make little videos about this and have some record of the family history before it disappears.
Yeah, absolutely.
I
Yeah.
come doing these. I came up with all these questions to ask, and there's nobody in the family left who really knows anything anymore.
Yeah, you gotta keep those stories going. Absolutely.
Yeah,
That's where, Halfway is inspired by my dad's time in a little small town in, Northwest Texas called Halfway,
yeah,
and he was surrounded by adversity and had to
hmm,
entertain himself with his brothers and eventually wanted to get out, but that's the inspiration for this show.
yeah,
Because those are stories that I was told. And then I realized after he passed that all of the stories that he told me as a kid were true because all the people around me that I was meeting when he passed were telling me those stories. And I was just like, oh my gosh, I've got to tell the story. So that's when I started writing. Yeah, I think it's important. It's incredibly
hmm.
important.
So
So,
I'm gonna be making some more of those. I'm trying to put one together now. I have a bunch of pictures of the family back in Flanders, back from going back to before World War One. So I'm gonna make a little video about that.
well, I cannot wait to see the YouTube channels, especially the rock and roll. I had no idea that you
Yeah,
did
check
that.
it
That
out.
is,
I think
yeah, I'm
the
looking
zip
at that tonight. Yeah,
is
I'm
gonna
gonna text
blow
that to
you
my
away.
man.
Yeah, and they did
Wow.
such a great job syncing audio to it.
And I'm a huge Freddie Mercury and Queen fan.
Yeah, and they did a beautiful job syncing audio to both of our Queen videos too.
Wow. Give us those website one more time and then we'll let you have your night back. I know you're working all
Yeah.
day and just so thankful for your time.
Okay. So it's DFW Cartoon Show, DFW Rock Show, and DFW Home Movie Matinee.
All right. Well, we've got some entertainment there. Paul, it's so great to
Hours of entertainment.
see. Yeah, hours. I can't wait. I cannot wait. But so thankful for your time. And I'm thankful for that opportunity to work with you, back in 2000, 2001 on that movie. Wish you the very best. And Bob's Burgers, huge fan. A lot of my friends, my kids, they watch that and so funny. Keep going, keep moving forward. We'll talk to you very, very soon. And I hope to see you face to face.
Yeah.
Next time, maybe you're in Texas if you do
Thanks for
travel.
having me on. And keep the guitars coming.
Absolutely. I'll be sharing those. Thank you.
All right. Good night.